Welcome to the Hoof Fang podcast. I'm Kirt Graves.
And I'm Maz Maddox.
And we are back. Mm-hmm. We took a break last week.
Yeah.
For several reasons.
Yeah.
One was just mental health.
Mm-hmm.
For those who are not patrons and do not have access to our early shift episode that comes out on Monday, where we reacted to the election results more fully.
Yeah.
We are not pleased.
To put it mildly.
Every day with new passing news, I become more displeased and afraid and worried.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually, I don't know. I keep flip-flopping between being mad and angry and sad and things like that. And at this point, I'm realizing, and I think we talked about it on the early shift, that social media is not helping with that. So I'm about to do a mass just everything being deleted. I even posted in my group that I was like, probably not going to be like, you guys keep sharing stuff, love it, but I'm like, I'm not going to be here anymore. Just for a while. But yeah, I think I'm probably going to uninstall a bunch of stuff and just be gone, because it's just right now it is a weird thing within the community that unless you've made a post saying that like you're upset, people are just assuming that you're pro the other side, and it's becoming like this huge dumpster fire of weird infighting for some reason. And I was like, okay, I super don't want to be here for this. This is awful. Yeah. Yeah. So it's just not great anywhere right now, which is not fantastic.
Right.
Like our little spaces are being, or I mean, people are upset, so it makes sense, but I don't know why we're pointing it inward for some reason.
Well, if somebody comes into my house and it turns out they're an asshole, I want to kick them out of my house.
For sure. Yeah. I get that. Like if somebody made a post being like, I'm happy, then fuck those guys. But if somebody's just not saying anything, you shouldn't take that as complicit. Maybe they're just really tired and do not have the spoons to make a post on Facebook. You know what I mean? It's weird. The climate's weird right now.
Yeah. But and I guess and I know this is not true of all people, but like I sort of start with a baseline of like the people who are in our groups, the male romance groups.
Right.
I start with a baseline of they're probably on our side politically, and then I let them reveal themselves otherwise.
Right. Yeah. They will show their full ass at some point. So, but I also understand the anger and the desire to do something. I don't think that's the most productive something we can do. Agreed.
I would love to purge the groups of people who think that they can enjoy stories about the lives of gay men and then in the real world vote against their best interests.
Yes. Yeah, agreed.
But you know what? They're not the only ones. There are plenty of gay men out there who vote against their own damn interests. We learned in this election there are plenty of people of color and people of religious minorities who voted in a way that I believe will be against their best interests.
Yeah,
and
it's wild to me.
We are all about to find out how true that is. And again, it's only been a week. Yeah. And already there are so many signs that, it's going to be just as bad as we thought it might. So, here we go. Yeah. Buckle up. It's going to suck. People are going to be deported. People are going to lose family members. Healthcare is going to be stripped.
Yep.
Medicaid's going to be stripped. We're going to lose more rights. More Supreme Court justices are going to be installed who will make sure there is a conservative, ideological court for many, many years. Yep.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not very positive right now. It's very gloomy.
Yeah, there's the only silver lining that keeps coming up again and again is like, well, at least there's not going to be a riot at the Capitol.
Yeah,
and
that's the one thing we got.
I'm loving all of the reporters at this point who are looking at the conservative people who have been bitching about problems with elections and saying like, so is there not a problem with this one?
Yeah, everything's fine.
This one was good. You're fine with this?
Weird.
8 years of saying that all elections are rigged and it's an unfair system, and now suddenly everything's okay?
Yeah. Strange. Weird how that works.
Isn't that strange? And with no shame, they're like, yep, nope, this one was good.
Yeah.
This one was fine.
Good
Lord. Like,
it's very frustrating.
Very frustrating. So yeah, anyways, we went into it more in our early shift episode, but yeah, just we're pissed. It's not happy.
Yeah, we're pissed. We're sad. We're tired. It's a lot of things.
And part of the reason we didn't air last week's episode is that we went into a somewhat heavy topic. And so we're going to sort of rehash that today.
Yeah.
Perhaps a bit angrier than we were a week ago.
Yeah, you got
a bit more fire in our belly.
Yeah, the nicer version's the one that's not coming out.
The nicer version is not coming out ever. Just because. So what we're talking about, just to put it out there, is we are talking today about we are going to end the Hoof Fang audio program, where we distribute audiobooks that are created with independent authors who otherwise couldn't afford to have them produced. So that was the message we were putting out last week, and after the election, we just felt like
maybe wait.
Yeah, let's not compound that issue.
Right.
And we also have an author interview that we'll throw to. So, and that would have sucked for them.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it would have.
So we just decided, let's wait. We'll talk about it again next week. And we had like a whole silly thing at the beginning about like, we did every reaction to what the election was going to be because we didn't know the results yet. And like,
definitely not appropriate.
When I sat down to edit, I was like, no, this is horrible. This feels so bad.
Yeah, agreed. We were a little too silly for the gravity.
This was a cute little bit when we thought that it was going to be close.
Yeah.
That, Kamala was going to win. And once it was not close and he won, it was like, oh, this isn't fun anymore. So,
right.
So anyways, that's that. We will get into the Hoof Fang audio thing, but the final episodes, the epilogues of Far From Neverland by River Hale came out this week.
Yes.
It has, now that it is complete, it is also an audiobook in Book Funnel that has been delivered to our patrons. If you did not get that in your library, go to the Patreon and find the post where you can download it off a landing page. And that will be there for a few days. So if there are folks who want the full audiobook, they can join at the $10 level for the next week or so, and they can still get that perk.
Yes.
And then also in the Patreon, we will be discussing Animorphs number 49, The Diversion, which comes out next week.
Indeed.
And we're still doing the early shift every Monday as we come together and catch up over the weekend. So, but in the future...
Yep.
There will be no more audiobooks from Hoof Fang.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
But we will explain why. We're not just shutting it off for funsies. We have a full reason as to why we're doing that.
So the original idea behind Hoof Fang that we have explained in detail several times on this podcast was to partner with independent authors and get books that, for whatever reason, would not make it to audio, mostly financial reasons.
Right.
To give them a chance to work with a professional narrator who can walk them through the process, put the book out there, use our audience to help fund that endeavor, both through Patreon memberships, and also we have our online store where we're selling direct to the reader. And what has happened over the course of a year, we've done not quite a dozen audiobooks.
I think we're at 9 total.
9
or 10
total. Feels like more.
Yeah.
After doing that many and doing the program for nearly a year, the Patreon subscription base did not go up.
Right.
The book sales through our website were next to nothing.
Yeah, I was going to say not great.
Not good. We saw a little bit of movement last February when we did our sale.
Yeah, our big sale.
For $3 a book.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people were interested. But since then, the books we have produced have got, I mean, guys, we're talking literally 5 or less sales.
Right.
With no increase in membership. In fact, it's gone down a little bit over the last few months. Understandably, we took some time off.
Right.
We switched from a monthly book model to an episodic one where it takes a little bit longer to get the full book out.
Yeah.
Those things make sense to us. But it's moving in the wrong direction for us to look at this at the 1 year mark and say, yes, let's keep doing that. And it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
It takes money. There is an investment involved in producing these books. There are tools we use on our end that are needed in order to proof them, edit them, send them to you. All of those, like none of those things are free.
Yeah, that's just, we're paying that out of pocket.
Right. So it just became clear that we can't keep doing it.
Yeah.
Because that time and energy and investment could be going towards something that maybe an audience would like more.
Right.
And to be perfectly frank with you guys, our friends who listen, we have heard directly from people that they don't want to buy it from us through our store. They're just going to wait until it comes out on Audible.
Yeah.
And so our thesis that people would be excited about an opportunity to support authors and creators directly and know that their purchasing power, 100% of that was going back to the creator. Turned out not to be true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a real slog to get people to try something different. And the feedback we got time and time again was, I'll just wait. I'll just wait until it's in the app that I'm already used to, or I already have a monthly credit.
Right.
Where the author and sometimes the narrator, if they split the profit, get a fraction of the cost of that audiobook.
Yeah, just a couple bucks.
Just a couple bucks.
Yeah.
So I think we have a lot more education to do in our community, that if we want to support artists, we are going to have to start finding ways to do so that don't go through Amazon, Spotify,
right,
or whatever other big company might get into the audiobook or publishing game in the coming years.
Right.
That if an author that you really like or a narrator that you really like offers a direct sale, use it.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Yeah, that is how they get money in their more money into their pockets so they can keep doing stuff.
Right.
And I mean, we've had people purchase a book, ask for a refund because they know it's coming out on Audible.
Yeah.
And so it's just, one of those like, okay, we hear you. We'll do something else.
Right.
That's kind of all we can do.
We had a theory. We tried.
Yeah.
Found out we weren't right about our theory.
Yeah. Yeah, that stings. But
it stings a little bit,
but, we'll move on. We'll pivot. Do something hopefully that people resonate with a little bit better.
Well, and even looking at the numbers of the audiobooks, the things that were that people seemed the most excited by were our collaborations, the things you and I did together, the ones you wrote that I narrated. Those were the most successful.
Yeah.
So clearly there is something about you and I together that people like, that we can continue to focus on.
Yeah.
But this particular endeavor, it just takes up too much time and too much investment to see no return on that investment after a year. And we did wait. Like, obviously we knew when we started this, we weren't expecting to see huge gains.
Yeah, it would be a slow, but like slowly uphill kind of thing.
Correct.
And not just like hit a weird plateau and just keep rolling slightly downwards.
Yeah, and never exceed. I mean, we talked about this on Monday as well, but like, if you want numbers, we try to be very transparent with numbers.
Yeah.
Like, we talked at the very beginning of this podcast when we introduced the Patreon that like our first level of subscribers where we were going to start adding content was 100 paid subscribers.
Yeah.
We never got to 100 paid subscribers.
Yeah. It's just how it is. Yeah.
And like people have kind of come and gone, but we've hovered around the same numbers and never quite hit that level we wanted. And so, it's just time to try something else.
Yeah.
So it's strange because it feels like, it's an ending and it feels like a really shitty time to be like, we're going to stop doing art. We're not going to stop doing art.
Correct.
We're just going to try something else.
We're going to do different kinds of art.
Yeah. Different kinds of entertainment, different ways to explore what people might enjoy seeing from the two of us specifically.
Right.
And so that's where we want your feedback.
Yeah, we're going to put a poll up in our Patreon. It'll be open to everyone, free members, paid, everybody, just to kind of get an idea. Or maybe not a poll, but maybe just like maybe an open forum or something.
Just a post. Like we don't,
Yeah. So it won't be super structured like that. So basically we'll have a feedback area open on Patreon where you can just let us know what you'd be interested in seeing. Toss ideas our way. Because at this point, we're kind of open to any type of feedback. So if you've got some cool ideas that we've never heard of, great. We'll look into it and see if it's something that's viable. So, but yeah, I'll get that post typed up and ready to go for Friday. So when this comes out, you should be able to just zip on over and just let us know what you think.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you are a patron at the Dear Listener level, know that we're keeping everything the same, like I said earlier, for about another week, just in case there is somebody who would like to get the Far From Neverland audiobook by becoming a patron for $10. It's still the best deal on an audiobook. We've been saying it this whole time. So for about a week, things will stay the same. If you want to go in and manually change your membership down to the $5 level, please do so.
Yeah.
But at a certain point in the next week or so, we will change everybody's billing so that it's just $5, regardless of which level you are at. So you can stay at Dear Listener. We'll know that's where you were, that's where you are, if we do something for that level later. So that everybody will be $5 for the Patreon and the content that we've been providing to everyone at the $5 level. And then expect that maybe we might switch some things up further in the future. But for right now, what we know for sure is we're going down to $5 for everybody. Yeah. Just to keep it even. Our theory of the case has always been that we'd rather do more because more people are paying attention. Yeah. Than do more because a few people want to pay us more money.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So that continues to be the theory of our case. It's, yes, part of this was about making money and having another like passive income stream. Yeah. One thing I've learned, this is not a passive income stream.
It sure is not.
It requires a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does.
And also, I still just feel strongly that like, I don't want to do it for, 60 or 70 people who are willing to shell out $20 a month. I want to do it for a couple hundred people who are happy.
You can happily
$5.
Exactly. It's cheap and easy. Everybody can afford it, and you get some good stuff, so it's more accessible that way.
Right. So we're brainstorming. We'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas. Please know that if we don't take your idea, it doesn't mean we didn't see it or think about it. We're going to see them. We're going to weigh them all. It's just going to be a matter of like what fits best into our life.
Right.
What energy level we're willing to put in. Because I think, again, looking at the next 4 years, as much as we want to continue to offer a safe space for people to come and celebrate the things that we all love, we will also need to take care of our own mental health.
Yes.
Big changes are coming your way already in work.
Exactly.
And then with having to move for that job in the next few months.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot.
We're going to take things one thing at a time. We're going to figure things out.
Yeah.
Things might change from month to month as we figure things out.
Right.
As you have ideas or feedback, please let us know. Preferably in the Patreon. Yeah. But if you don't have access to that, you can also email us at hoofandfangpodcast@gmail.com.
Yep, that works too.
Yes. So that's out there. That's what's going on, guys. We thank you for your support as we have done this. I am so incredibly proud of the books we have done.
Yeah, they're great.
And that exist in the world now. It's just, if money weren't an issue, if money and time weren't an issue.
Yeah, if we were both somehow snagged sugar daddies apiece and we can just like do cool shit like this all the time without having to worry about it, we would be.
Absolutely.
But,
absolutely.
It's just not our lives.
And I also don't want to minimize the fact that like the income we have gotten from Patreon and when people have bought the books. We so appreciate that.
Absolutely.
It wasn't nothing.
No, it was great.
It was encouraging enough for a while for us to keep going.
For sure. But at a certain point, I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
It was the lack of growth.
Yes.
It was the lack of new members that really pointed to us that like whatever we're doing, it's not drawing new people in.
Yeah.
And it has to.
Right.
If it's going to continue.
Yeah. And that's what we do as creators. If it's not working, we pivot. There's something that we can do something better to make more people happy and to pull in more audience. And we just haven't figured it out yet. But when we do, we'll do that and it'll be fun. Yeah. So this is, it's, like mentioned before, it kind of sucks that we have to, stop doing the thing we're excited about, but it just means that, there's another cool thing just around the corner. So.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, and timing is a part of it too.
Right.
So right now, maybe just isn't the time. Who knows? Maybe we revisit it at some time in the future. If we do get more members from doing something else, if we see another revenue stream sort of supplement things in a way that makes it possible to give more of our time without worrying about seeing a return on investment. Like, who knows what the future holds?
Right. Yeah, you never know.
Trump's going to fix the economy and we're all going to be rich. So maybe none of us will have to work.
Yeah, especially if you're middle class.
Right.
It's really good.
Yeah, we're all going to just be, groceries are going to be free.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to give them away.
Yeah.
So sorry to end on such a sarcastic note. Sorry, guys. That was sarcasm.
I wonder how many people
don't
are
come
just
for
like,
me in the
Jesus,
groups.
yeah.
Don't come for me in the groups.
Oh, shit.
So yeah, so that's what's going on our side. We're gonna pivot again to something a little more joyous.
Yes.
We had the chance to talk with a local Wisconsin author.
Yes,
which was so much fun. We got to chat with E.H. Lupton, who lives in Madison with her family. She's the author of Dionysus in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's in the damn title. And Old Time Religion. She is a published poet and one half of the duo behind the hit podcast Ask a Medievalist.
So cool.
And who doesn't need to ask a medievalist something?
Right? The topics on this podcast are so cool. You guys have to check it out.
And in her free time, she enjoys running long distances and painting. So here is our interview with E.H. Lupton. Welcome to Hoof Fang, author E.H. Lupton. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you.
Yeah.
We're thrilled to have a fellow Wisconsinite in the chat.
Yeah. Whoop.
In another time and place, you might have made the drive. Like before remote interviews became so easily accessible. It might have been like, hey, just come on over to Green Bay.
Right.
It's only 2.5 hours.
Yeah, nothing.
But we're really happy to have you and really happy to chat about your work. Before we get into the work, though, we do typically just want to start with like, what is your author journey? Like, how did you become author E.H. Lupton?
Yeah, that's such a fun question because I think I started writing, like for real, trying to write a story, right? Probably in the mid 90s when I was 12 or 13. And I don't know if you guys are like Doctor Who fans.
I am.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
Yeah. So way in the back before anybody, when nobody in the US knew what it was, I was like on our local bulletin board system getting these weird like email updates that I had somehow gotten on this listserv for that had like spoilers for the forthcoming, what became like the Paul McGann movie. Oh, and wow. I was really angry about the spoilers. And my father, I think, was like, well, if you don't like it, write your own.
Good advice.
And I was like, oh, fine. You know?
Don't you hate like when dads do that? When it makes sense and you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
So I started that, and eventually I wrote a lot of Doctor Who fan fiction of questionable quality because I was 14. And I went to college and I double majored in philosophy and English with a creative writing emphasis, which is like not a super amazing way to become a great author. Like they don't teach you how to write, but they give you space to write and to sort of learn the bones of like, this is what a critique is. This is, strategies for revision. And then I just kept, poking away at things. I had written this novella and put it in a drawer after my degree. Like I moved overseas. I wrote some questionable mystery novels because I had this feeling that like a mystery novel had a really clear plot, which is like somebody is dead and you have to figure out what happened. And like I liked that as a way to structure the story. And the same thing with like writing fantasy. I was very like Tolkien-ized, I guess. And like the idea that you had like a there's a quest and you have to do a quest. You have to carry a thing to a place or whatever. That this as an idea of how to structure a story was very useful for me at the time. And, like you go through life. Eventually I got the novella that had been my senior thesis published with a small press. And that was The Joy of Fishes. And I think it came out in like 2013 or 2014. And the press actually, like 3 months ago, they closed. So if you look on my website under like the bibliography section, I just stuck it up there for free. If you're interested in like physics and Taoism, like that sort of thing.
As so many people are.
As so many people are. Yes. Yeah, we go through phases. Anyway. I had a really good run there of being like writing a short story, and then it would be like the last issue of the journal. I started writing prose poems, and I had a couple of those that were like the last issue. Some of them are still up there on the web, which is amazing.
But you have a bit of a reputation.
Yeah, right?
Yes. Yeah, watch out.
Yeah.
And then at some point, like I had a kid in 2017, and after a while I had like developed really bad anxiety. And one thing that I sort of started getting into was reading romance novels because they always had happy endings. Mm. So at some point I went through a really stressful period of like everybody in my household got COVID, my husband and I had been vaccinated, but the kids, like there wasn't a kids vaccine out yet.
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of vomiting. It was pretty bad. My husband had knee surgery, and like one of our kids got diagnosed with, thing. And like, it was just this year of like terrible whatever. And I found a file with like 2 chapters of a romance novel I had started 10 years ago, set in London in 1883. And I was like, this looks fun. I'm going to do this. And like, I didn't want to be in 2022. So I was just like living in 1883, and I finished that, and it was awesome. And I was like, at some point I had this idea. It's like, I'm going to write about a place that I know that doesn't feel super foreign to like, people that I know who could be in novels maybe. And like Madison is such a weird place that it somehow felt like Madison in the 60s. And like, if you want to do some fantasy, it feels like Madison in the 60s could be that kind of place anyway. And like a whole bunch of things just sort of coalesced. And that is when I wrote Dionysus in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Okay, so now tell us about the book itself, because we get a little preview with the and I gotta say too, as somebody like Madison has never been my cup of tea. The strange mix of like college and politics and hippieism is perfect for so many people, and it just was too much from my sensibilities, my gentle sensibilities. But
I love towns like that.
But the way you're talking about it as a setting for this type of novel makes so much sense to me.
For sure.
Yeah. So it's really an interesting place to live, right? Like, I think sometimes when you get a huge number of very progressive people living in the same place, you get this sort of way of like progressives hating on other progressives, which can be deeply amusing and or frustrating.
Almost always both.
Yes. Like I go run around and like look at the people have like pro rezoning, anti rezoning signs, and I'm like, I don't know what this is even talking about, right. But there's obviously like lots of people making yard signs about it. But yeah, so Madison in the 60s was really a very hotbed of anti-Vietnam War sentiment. there's a big movement, the Black student movement, demanding that there would be more courses taught that like centered Black students. There's still things on campus today that are sort of a direct result. Like there's an African American Studies department that's kind of a direct result of like this strike that they had in 1969. Madison has always been like big on progressive labor stuff. So like one of the first grad student unions in the country started here. And they were also like very progressive politically and trying to do things like get domestic partner benefits before like that was a popular thing nationally. And so like you get all of these like very intense political things going on campus, contrasted with like the legislature, which is always like less progressive. And Madison starts to feel like this very interesting sort of bubble of like something fermenting. Mm-hmm. And like the things about hippies and drugs, I just remembered I'm supposed to be talking about the novel and not just hippies.
We're talking about the setting of the novel.
You're building a backdrop.
Yeah. Right. So hippies, also out there doing a lot of drugs. That did not change by the time I was a student. Although like nowadays, I walk down State Street, nobody tries to sell me drugs. I don't know if I just like look too normie or something. We've become too gentrified.
Yeah. This is the saddest story about someone not being offered drugs
I've ever heard.
Right? You gotta work harder these days than you did in like 2002.
Yeah. Maybe it's just the internet.
Yeah.
I know. Everything's going online. Yeah. So I don't think of myself as like a super trope driven writer. So I don't know if this is actually a trope of like guy who's walking around with a god in his head. But for some reason, and I think it partially, I had been reading like a bunch of novels written by Jordan L. Hawk, where he, I think he has one of them where the main character gets possessed. And I was like, oh yeah. Guy walking around with a god in his head is a cool trope.
Only one head. That's the trope.
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
There you
done.
Go.
And I was like,
you can use that.
we have it now. I'm going to make a new Arrow picture to put up on social media. But like, what god, right? There's so many. But obviously, like, it felt like there's a kinship between Dionysus and like the 60s. Partially because of like the wildness and like the not being willing to be constrained by like in Dionysus's case, temples, right? Like his rituals all taking place out in the woods, and the rituals themselves being wild and like people going into a frenzy and tearing things apart. Like that seems very promising. And not a ton known about the actual rituals of Dionysus because he was kind of a mystery cult. So that gives you a lot of space to work with as a writer. And also Dionysus as a god was like kind of queer. He had like, male lovers, female lovers. And he was also married and very loyal to his wife, to Ariadne, which I found interesting in light of the rest of Greek mythology. So he felt like a really promising god to draw into all of this. And that's sort of like the background of the first book is like a grad student who is in the Department of Magic, but doing that thing that PhD students do when they're done with classes and they don't really want to be writing their thesis. And you see them and they're like, oh yeah, I'm working on a chapter, whatever. And you're like, man, you've been dissertating for 4 years. What are you doing? No
oh
shade.
my God, the verb dissertating.
Yeah.
Just
I should be clear, I have 2 master's degrees from UW. I stopped. This is not intended to be throwing shade at people who chose to continue, but they did make a questionable life choice, and I'm very sorry. So we have our grad student whose name is Ulysses, because I get very attached to silly names and then I don't ever change them. He meets this guy who's an archivist who might be turning into Dionysus. And then they go have adventures.
Oh, what kind of adventures?
I know, right?
Yes. We meander between, like being attacked by demons, going to community theater projects.
Equally harrowing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. I love community theater people. Let's see, what else do they do? They go dancing at one point and it sort of turns into a bacchanalia.
Mm-hmm.
Normal things.
Right.
Normal couple things that people do.
Well, you were talking earlier about like how your early writing really included a lot of the hero's journey. Is there an influence of that still in this book, even though it's a romance?
Heroes. Okay, so I do really like a lot of things about the hero's journey. Especially like the specific Joseph Campbell stuff, right? Partially because what I really like is like this moment, because you have like, the call, the rejection of the call, like it's all very epic feeling, I think is the word I'm looking for. But eventually you have this moment where like the hero has like lost everything and he still has to go forward and like figure out how he's going to save the day. And I think in Dionysus, we do get to this moment where Ulysses is standing in a graveyard on Madeline Island, and he's got most of the people that he came with are not going to be helpful, like they're tied up or something, and there's demons attacking, and like Sam has been totally overtaken by Dionysus, and he's like, gotta figure it out. I made a decision at some point that I was not going to treat like people getting killed as like just it felt like an easy out, right?
Mm-hmm.
That like especially in fantasy novels that are not urban fantasy, but like high fantasy, characters can be killed. Like, Boromir gets killed and it's like a big deal, but it doesn't ever have like legal repercussions the way that it would in an urban setting, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That like you don't ever get to see like the police coming to interview the orcs and be like, sir, what are you doing? Are you sure that he was acting as a threat to you? Like, was he was holding a sword? Okay, holding a sword. People are allowed to openly carry swords here in Gondor. Whatever. No, like
I would read that though. Like I want to hear the breakdown of that interview where they're called out. They've got to do a whole like good cop, bad cop with an orc. Somebody
There's
write
some
it, please.
like orc lawyer. Bum, bum.
Yes, I would so be down for that. Sorry, I derailed us, but I was just like, yes, this. I would totally read that.
Like a crime solving series.
Yeah, but like high fantasy.
High fantasy.
Love that.
Yeah. I don't want to write a police procedural anymore. But so because of that, I don't want to like have somebody do a murder and then like have to deal with people talking to the police. Not what I find exciting to write about. And there's like enough stuff out there that lionizes the police that like you don't need anyway. But also like in some way, like just killing somebody felt like an easy way out. So then you get to like this moment where you're like, here's constraints that we put around this, and you have nothing. like solve the problem. And I think that I came to that sort of moment at the end of the second book too. Maybe I always come to that kind of moment where you're like, things get stripped away and you're left with some sort of bare reckoning. So I think that type of moment feels like something that there's a lot to pull out of it as a writer.
I am curious about what your relationship to mythology was before you started writing, and how much you felt like you had to adhere to like established thoughts of like the character of Dionysus, and how much you felt like, no, I can take the inspiration of this mythological being and create my own character.
Yeah. So, when I was a kid, I think that there were a couple of books. Dyer's Greek mythology is probably the big one that I remember. My folks had one. It was similar, if not the same authors, about Norse mythology. And I have been in and out, like, as a student, I was very interested in world religions. And I mentioned Taoism. That was a thing for me while I was studying Chinese. And I had been very interested in India and the religions of India. But never, I'm not a folklorist, right? So when I went to do this, initially, I had a few things, some of which I had learned through doing, Ask a Medievalist. Like my cousin that I do the podcast with started out as a classicist before she became a medievalist. And she's in theater. So one big right to Dionysus was theatrical. So I had picked up like little bits of it here and there, but I didn't feel like I needed to go out and read everybody else's take on him before I got started. Especially because I have this thing in my head about gods being ultimately kind of alien and unknowable in their way, even though that's probably less true for like Greek gods, because they were imagined in a way that people could see like the reflection of their own problems and whatever. There was like a really good book. Yes, Starless by Jacqueline Carey, where the characters are, it's if you haven't read it, it's a really cool book because the main character is kind of assigned female at birth, but sort of grows up very non-binary and thinks over the course of the novel a lot about like how they want to gender themselves, but also they are basically like a Shaolin monk with all of the cool like ninja training montage stuff that you might want. And they become the bodyguard of like this princess who I think is also like walks with a cane. So there's like some disability representation, which is really interesting. And then they go on an adventure to like kill God or something. But
I was really hoping this description was going to end with an adventure to kill God.
Yeah, right? Holy crap. I love that.
There's a couple of scenes where they do encounter like these deities that are worshipped by their culture. Like it's a very like everybody has their own god who actually exists. And the way that she sort of related the gods as like obviously having their own stuff going on and that mortals maybe didn't understand felt like a very interesting and cool idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I think so I work in layers a lot when I write. So I had this initial draft and it had probably been through a couple of edits. And then I was like, well, I should read the Bacchae. So I went through and read, found a translation of that and read it. And like, I was like, wow, this is amazing. But also, like, the parts that I found were the most fun were like little Greek translations that I was like, oh, I can't believe they have a word for that. But then I was like, I don't think I can just like stick that into my novel. That like, I want to steal that idea, but I also don't have room in this fight scene for like a 3-page explanation of Greek. So
good instinct.
Yeah. I feel like that really pulls you out of the story.
Not all authors have that instinct to edit. Yeah. So that's good. Yeah. Good instincts.
Yeah. But anyway, so like it did inform like the what eventually became the finished version, I think.
Great. Well, and did you know when you were writing this first book that you were going to try to make it into a series, or is that something that came about after the first book was out?
Oh, God.
That's a $10 million question, right?
Yeah. It happened as I was finishing the book. I wrote the first scene of the next book. I don't think I knew it was going to be the first scene, but like I wanted to write something about Ulysses's ex-girlfriend kind of coming back into town, and like, you know, so I bounce around. I was like, okay, I'll write that. And at some point I had been talking to my friend that I sort of started this. I was like, this will keep them amused. It'll keep me amused. Like, this is, you know, it's a good time. I was like, Jordan Hawk wrote like 11 novels in the Widdershins series. How many should I write? And they were like, 9. Write 9. And I was like, okay. So I felt like I had been dared at that point. So
9 is a hell of an undertaking too. That's a lot. Because like I think the longest I've done was 7, and I wanted to die by the end of it. I was like, why did I think 7 was the magic number? Like 3's fine. Like, why are we doing 3?
Yeah.
At least triptychs, like sets of 3.
Yeah, there you go.
Like
yeah,
you might want to do another set of 3.
Yeah, maybe. But 9, ooh, my hat is off to you.
Well, what we wind up with is 4 novels to cover sort of the initial plot arc that we get into. 2 novels that are like Ulysses's younger brother Lazarus and his partner, and then 3 more that I'm not going to say who the characters are because it would be spoilery. Mm-hmm. But like those ones are set later, like 1990 to 2005 or something. So yeah, I've written 8 of them. I'm working on what will be the last one that I have to write, but it's book 8.
Wow. So they're already done. You've already written everything?
I've written first drafts of them.
That's
what
awesome.
I found. So like one thing I found when I was working on the editing of book 3, you know, like things that I had finalized in book 2 had to change some of the things that happened in book 3. Because like I wrote, I think the first couple of books, I think almost the first 3 books before I had finished and published the first one. And in the first one, I decided that it was going to be more of a queer norm world with no homophobia. So then I had to like go back and like, you know, edit the second book and like take these moments out of like somebody being worried that people would find out that he was gay. And like you make lots of other little decisions about how characters act, to say nothing of like big plot points that can shift. Like I'm a very iterative writer. So I often have just like a really fast first draft, and then this person reads it, and then I do edits, and then this person reads it, and then eventually my editor sees it, and then I do like 3 more drafts until somebody takes it right out of my hands and goes like, stop it.
Yeah.
Stop, it's done. So.
It's done enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I am one of those community theater people. I just directed a show and had that feeling of like, it's done enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not because I think it's done, but because it's the day we said people could see it.
Yeah. Right.
So
Yeah.
at a certain point,
Yeah.
like,
You kind of have to let it go. Let it just be what it is.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tina Fey in her book talks about one of the things that Lauren Michaels taught her is like, the show must go on, not because you think it's ready, but because it's 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, it's 11 o'clock.
Right. Right.
You're done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reflecting on that because I think, like, I'm at the stage now where Amazon is sending me like the little email that says, please upload your manuscript in 2 days,
Mhm.
1 day. And I was like, if I hadn't set up this pre-order thing, months ago,
Yep.
I would be like, we can just kick this out a couple of weeks. I
Mhm.
just want to continue reading every sentence in the document backwards until I have removed every awkward, whatever. I don't think the words are actually awkward. I think that I'm just incapable of not changing things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This morning I was like looking at every quotation mark to be like, did I get all of the smart quotes like facing the right direction?
I just went through that. Like, I feel this so hard.
Oh,
like,
God.
yeah.
This is something I never wanted to worry about. And now I'm going to think about it.
Yeah, just because they always sneak in, and then you look at your printed book and you're like, yay, so happy. And then you flip open to a page where like one of the quotations is goofy looking, the other one looks fine. And you're like, okay,
Yeah.
everything's fine. I'm not going to go cry about it. It's fine. I'm just going to make myself a drink. But yeah.
Yep.
Feel you.
Yeah, exactly. It's a peril to like self-publishing because being like publishing books is very different from like writing books, which writing books is fun, and publishing books is like the buck ultimately stops with me, and so nobody is actually able to like give me permission to say like it's done.
Yeah.
And it turns out that I have become like so detail oriented because like everything, like my day job is computer programming, which is very detail oriented. And my hobbies are like painting, which is detail oriented. And then like I'm incapable of like not looking at every single.
Yeah.
So it's kind of terrible. I mean, like it's delightful because you get a finished book and like somebody calls you up and is like, hey, I read your book. It was wonderful. And also you go blind, like just being like, is that a double space or a single space?
Right. Yeah.
And like nobody else notices like the goofy quotations or the double spaces. They don't care, but you will always see it. And like it's awful.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong process of getting comfortable putting something out in the world.
Yes.
Especially, so I know so many creative people who are the same way, that it's just like, yeah, we would nitpick at it.
Yeah.
We would find reasons not to put it out in the world if we had that sort of flexibility. And sometimes it is an external motivator that gets us to finally do it. And it's like, well, thank God for that. Because otherwise I would have just kept tweaking this thing until I thought it was perfect. And I was never going to think it was perfect.
Yeah.
Yep. That is the cold truth. Like it's never, for us, it's never going to be good, but it probably is fantastic. Most of the readers will be like, it's great. And you're like, no.
I have to assume that, I have to assume that it's like that I cannot have fooled, all of the hundreds of people who bought and read the book. Like that's, wow, I'm really good at fooling people. Like, if that's the case, that like actually they enjoyed it. I did not trick them somehow, but like
and
there's always a part of me.
You tricked the Lambda Literary Awards too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was the first time I became aware of your book, because one of the books I narrated was also in your category. And I was scrolling through and I was like, Wisconsin? What? Dionysus in where? And then I got to look you up and I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
And I probably thought at the time, like, this is somebody we'll have to have on the podcast at some point.
And our fickle memories.
Yep.
And here we are.
And here we are. So, but congratulations on that honor.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
very
you.
That
cool.
is amazing.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a weird thing because it feels both like super momentous as a debut novelist to be like, wow, I got shortlisted for a national award. And like, I lost to Cat Sebastian and that was fine. I loved her book.
Yeah.
No complaints. I went to New York.
If you have to lose to somebody.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I got really drunk on whiskey and like watched the presentation. It was great.
Yay.
But also like you have this feeling that like this is a weird sort of almost a statistical error because there's like so few people chosen compared to how many people put their books in. And you know, like lots of people write really good books. So you just have to take it for what it is, right? That like at this moment, at this, whatever the politics behind the people who are making the choices, if they were like, we need a fantasy romance to go in the set because we have like contemporary romance and we have like the couple historical romance, you know, whatever. They needed one. I was there, right place, right time. I had fun. It was good.
Gosh. Again, creative people will just explain away any accomplishment.
I was going to say,
just refuse to feel good about something.
Yeah.
I thought I was doing really good at that. It was fine. It was statistical nonsense.
Yeah. No. We got to call each other out when we see it. Like, you just wrote a good book.
Yeah, maybe it's just a really good book.
They liked it.
Exactly.
So that's something to celebrate and very cool. I feel like we could keep talking for a long time. But interviews can't last forever.
Yes,
so
true.
I guess we'll just have to have you back another time to chat more about
that would be brilliant.
Wisconsin Gothic, which is the series, and in subsequent books as they're coming out, we'll have you back to chat more about it.
For sure.
Thank you so much for coming on the pod and chatting about your books, and we will definitely have you back in the future.
Wonderful.
So that was our chat with E.H. Lupton. Her newest release, Troth, the third book in the Wisconsin Gothic series, is out now. Make sure to follow her wherever she is on social media. As always, you can check for their website and their social media, all of our guests in the show notes of the episodes. And you're a fan of the podcast. You want people to go check it out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Ask a Medievalist, it's fantastic. Like, just look at the first... I mean, depending on when you listen to this episode, but if you just look at like the last 3, I was just like, I don't even know where to start because all of these topics are just so deliciously nerdy. So yes, everybody needs to.
And deliciously nerdy is really what we aspire to here as well. So yeah, go check that out. And we will be back next week. And in the meantime, check us out on our website, on Patreon, and on social media. Search Hoof Fang Podcast to find any and all of the above.
Yes.
Bye-bye.